Um, I'm going to be telling a story that takes place in the town of Chelm. And this story is called The Golem of Chelm, and it's by Mark Binder. The town of Chelm is a town of fools. Well, some people say it's a town of people who are very, very wise. But they're so wise that no one understands them and thinks them foolish. Anyway, in Chelm, there are many different townsfolk, many different people. And they're all special. But one townsfolk in Chelm is different, even for Chelm standards, because you see, this individual is not what we would call, how you say, human. Yes, this individual is not human. This individual is a golem, a mythical creature made from inanimate objects and brought to life by a piece of paper with the name of God written on it that it uses as its tongue. And this story is how it was created, at least the first time. Long ago in the town of Chelm, there was a young rabbi. And it was the day before the first day of school, and on the first day of school, the children always played pranks on the rabbi. He remembered last year. Oh, it was horrible. As we all know, young rabbis live on coffee, and the children replaced his sugar dish with salt. So when he drank in his coffee, he couldn't think about it any longer, no. He asked every single person in Chelm to substitute for him, but everyone knew what that would involve, and everyone said no. Well, the rabbi was sitting in his study, and the rabbi had many interests. He was interested in mysticism and very interested in calligraphy. And as the young rabbi was sitting at his desk, he was reading. He was also looking over a letter, and he was also writing notes. He did many things at the same time, and what he was reading was very interesting, and he was distracted, so he didn't pay attention to what he was writing on the other piece of paper, and without realizing it, his mind wandered, and he drew a few pictures, and without even noticing it, he wrote the name of God. And the name of God has power, and he wrote it in beautiful, beautiful calligraphy. And next to it, he drew a goose, and he wrote a poem, and there was a horse, and eventually the paper was covered with doodles, and when the rabbi glanced at it, he thought it was just scrap now. So the young rabbi threw this paper, where all young rabbis throw important documents and scrap paper, into the laundry bin. And then he sat down and continued with his reading. But then he heard something. The rabbi looked over, but there was nothing there. He calmed himself. It was just his nerves. The first day of school was tomorrow. But then he heard it again, and he looked, and there was nothing there. Calmed himself, but then he heard it again. He knew he heard it, and he stood up and he looked. There must be a child in the classroom, but there was still nothing there. As he was about to sit down again, he saw that his laundry bin was shaking. And then, from the laundry bin arose a thing. He didn't know what it was. It was a thing. It was wearing the rabbi's gardening boots and his comfiest pair of pants that he wouldn't wear to a formal occasion. And it was wearing the rabbi's finest jacket with a torn shirt underneath it. And on top of its head was a hat that the rabbi's mother had given him. And the creature didn't have a head. It had a pillowcase with a tear in it that seemed to be where a mouth should be. And the rabbi screamed, and the creature screamed. And when the creature screamed, the rabbi saw that the creature's tongue was a piece of paper. And he saw that this was the paper he was writing on, and he saw the name of God on this paper. And he knew what this creature was. This creature was a golem, a mystical creature brought to life by the name of God, made from inanimate objects. And should this paper be destroyed, it would fall to the pieces that made it. The rabbi looked at the golem and said, "You are a golem." And the golem looked at the rabbi and said, "You are a golem." well, eventually they had it straightened out that the rabbi was in fact a rabbi, and the golem was in fact a mystical creature brought to life by a piece of paper. It was very, very simple when you don't think about it. Anyway, the rabbi realized that he had created the perfect substitute teacher. Well, the next day of school came, and the children all ran to the classroom, and they talked and laughed with each other, and then they decided to discuss the pranks that they were going to pull on the rabbi this year. And one child said that he had covered the chalkboard with wax so that when the rabbi tried to write, the chalk wouldn't stick. Another child laughed at this and said that he had placed a piece of stale matzah on the rabbi's chair so that when the rabbi sat down, it would break and get crumbs all over his fine attire. Well, another child scoffed at both of them, for he had found where the rabbi's lunch was, and he had replaced the meat in the rabbi's sandwich with an old dirty dish rag so that when the rabbi bit into it, the rabbi would be biting into who knows what. Well, they waited and waited, but the rabbi didn't show up, and it was getting late. The rabbi should be here by now. But then the door turned, and in walked something. It wasn't the rabbi. It wore the rabbi's clothes, but it was puffier than the rabbi and had a pillowcase for a head. And one child said, "Rabbi, wearing a pillowcase can't protect you from our pranks." And the creature turned and said, "Sheket," which means be quiet. So, of course, all the children were very quiet. And it didn't have the voice of the rabbi, so they knew it must be a substitute. Well, the substitute walked up to the chalkboard, and all the children snickered. But the substitute seemed to reach inside its chest and pull out a towel, and it wiped off the chalkboard and then continued with the lesson. Well, later in the day, the substitute sat down on the chair, but the matzah didn't break because it seemed the substitute was too light to break the matzah. Well, that was boring. The children knew that there was one more prank, though, and it was the best of all. So they waited until lunch. And when lunch came, they all got their snacks and then watched as the substitute picked up his bag. And they watched as the substitute reached in and took out the sandwich. But the substitute didn't eat it. The substitute reached in the bag again and took out 2 dirty socks. And in horror, in stunned horror, the children watched as the substitute ate both dirty socks. And then the substitute looked at the class, opened up the sandwich, and took out the dirty dish towel. And the substitute smiled at the class and seemed to say, "Thank you." Now, who knows what the children may have learned were the dish towel dry, but no, the dish towel was dropped in a puddle on the way to school, and it was soaking wet. And when the golem ate it, the water ran on the paper, and the ink started to run, and the paper started to tear. And with the paper gone, the paper with the name of God written on it, the golem fell apart into the pieces that had created it. And the children screamed and ran from the classroom and ran home and told their parents, who ran to the school to see what was happening. And when they got there, all they saw was the rabbi sitting calmly at his desk, reading a book, with a pile of laundry in a corner. The rest of the school year was very uneventful. And the next year, on the first day of school, the rabbi was not nervous at all. The children, on the other hand, were rather nervous. And as for the golem of Chelm, well, he was destroyed once, but he'd be back again. Though that's a different story.